Speaking of revamping, we have somebody here that you are kind of familiar with, I guarantee you. Patrick Dix is joining us. How are you, my friend?
Morning, guys. How are you?
See you again, man.
How are you?
Yeah,
wonderful.
Long time no see, but you
Good to be back on a TV set.
As I say, never thought this would happen, but it's in a whole new light of what you're doing
It's
now.
totally different being on
Now
the
you're
side
wearing a
of it, I'll tell you
pin.
that.
You're wearing a pin that
I am.
looks very familiar. Here, zoom in on this, Craig.
My boss will like this.
Check
I'm
this
wearing
out.
my pin.
SHAZAM. Do you guys remember SHAZAM?
Okay, so when I heard that you were going to this company, the first thing I thought of, this was my first ATM card. When, I was a teenager, it blatantly said SHAZAM across it. Now, I haven't really seen it since then, so I was like, okay, SHAZAM, what's the, what do they have
probably actually see it everywhere. So you're right.
I just don't even realize
40 years ago, we were at the birth of electronic funds transfer. When people started transferring money over wires, basically, that was us. And we were started by a law here in the state of Iowa, actually. And that was sort of our birthplace. And over the last 40 years, we've grown into a financial services company that we do everything from, we still drive ATMs is what we call it. So you'll see our symbol on the ATM. That's where most people know us from in Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska.
Haven't you written a lot of the code that makes everything work on the ATMs?
On the back side of it, we really have driven a lot of the technology for that and for credit cards, and now we're into security as well. And with the new EMV chip cards that are coming out, we've done a lot to make sure that the debit networks are involved in that, and to make sure that both the merchants and the banks have choice and flexibility in how they use those cards and how they route their transactions.
Now, people have heard this, these chipped cards, so to speak. Explain what that's all about.
So this is what it's going to look like, and the good part about this is my credit card, but the number isn't on the back of the card.
Darn it.
So yeah, you can't see it on TV, but there's just going to be a little chip on the card. And it's a computer. Your card has a computer now on it, and yeah, that's a good.
And how does it? If it has a computer, how does it run? Is there a little tiny battery in it? Or?
So what happens is that you stick the card into the terminal, and the terminal and the chip talk to each other. And what happens is that chip generates a unique set of information for every transaction.
So the terminal charges the chip.
Well, no, the terminal, the chip runs on its own.
It does run on its own.
So the chip runs on its own. This
so
this card could run. I was told this card could run for 15 or 20 years.
Oh wow.
So you're seeing kind of the new machines. That, like I know over at Jordan Creek Mall where I work sometimes, we've all switched over to these new machines. So if you have the new chip.
Well, that's the thing, is that the machines are there, but a lot of the software isn't. So you are still swiping in a lot of cases.
Right.
Okay.
And so October 1st was the liability shift. And what that meant was the big credit card companies said, okay, if you don't have, as a merchant, if you don't have these chip readers, and as the bank, if you haven't issued the cards, whoever has the lesser technology, essentially, is going to be liable for fraudulent transactions. Now, everybody kind of freaked out about that because they don't want the liability. But when you think about it, the only way as a merchant you're going to be liable for a fraudulent transaction is if I hand you an EMV card and you don't have the EMV reader, right? Except you can't counterfeit these cards. So how's this going to be a fraudulent transaction?
So everyone's hearing how these are safer for you. Is it because the numbers aren't on them? So there's no one able to be like, okay, this number is...
It's because of that unique transaction. So every time you stick this into the machine, it generates a unique set of information, and that information goes out over the rails and comes back. So if you tried to counterfeit that information, we would know it's fraudulent right away.
Okay, because it had been used before.
It's like a one-time password, essentially. So you can't ever use it again.
So this is great news.
Now, are there numbers on the card at all?
Yes, and so like on mine, there are numbers on the back of the card.
Got it.
And
okay.
And some of them have, it just depends. Some of them will still have numbers on the front. You will still be able to swipe your card. If you're a merchant, you can. If you don't have any fraud as a merchant, you can still use the old cards, and it's not a big deal. Okay. And you will migrate over to the EMV when it makes sense for your business. That's what we're telling. We work with about 5,000 merchants around the Midwest, and we're saying to them, wait until it makes sense for your business. If you get a lot of fraud at your point of sale, and think about those cases, Walmart, Best Buy, Target, they've all switched. And so if you have fraud at the point of sale, this is going to help. Now, where this won't help is internet. And card not present fraud, that we think that a lot of the fraud is going to migrate online now. So for consumers, it's really important that they make sure that if they shop online a lot, that they're checking their accounts quite a bit, because we feel like that's going to be the big target for fraudsters.
So here in Central Iowa, when can we see this switch kind of officially take over?
It'll depend, because some small merchants have it, and so they'll say use it. And if you have one of these cards and I try to swipe the card, if it's EMV capable, the terminal will say to me, nope, go ahead and stick the card in instead of swiping.
Now, will the little black strips on the back, will they still be on there?
They'll stay. And so if you go to Europe, they've been using this for 20 years. But if you go to Europe, they'll still have the swipe reader. Now, they'll look at you funny because everybody over there uses the EMV, and they actually use what's called chip and pin. You got to stick the chip in, and then you have to enter your PIN. We didn't go all the way in the United States. The big credit card companies didn't decide to go all the way, but that is the most secure way for a transaction to happen, is chip and PIN.
What does this do? You know, you hear a lot about the thieves will put the little reader on top of the
skimming.
The skimmers. Is it?
So skimming is sort of is an entirely different deal, and I think people still have to be aware of that, because we're going to see a little bit more of that, as well as at ATMs. ATMs don't switch over to the EMV technology for another year, most of them. And then gas pumps won't switch over until 2017. Those will cost, for a retailer, at each pump anywhere from $12,000 to $20,000. So at each head will have that cost. So if you're Casey's and you're looking at that cost, you can see why they're waiting.
It's 120 grand, you know, shell of cash out, you know,
just for one. For a couple. For a couple. But if you're a big chain like Casey's is, you're looking at this, and this is a major expense. When you think about it, though, they have to be weatherproof. They are a non-monitored point of sale. So nobody's standing there with you to use the credit card, so that means it has to have a lot of extra security on it. And then you have to build the readers in as well, which costs some money. So
would it do any good to call your bank and say, hey, Patrick was on the air,
I was just going to
found
ask
out
that,
about this, can you make this happen?
Your bank is not slow if they haven't given you a chip card yet, okay? So this is not something you have to rush out and get. You will get these when your card expires. I've gotten mine as my cards have rotated through, and that's what we've told our financial institutions. We work with about 1,300 financial institutions in 37 states, and we've said to them, as the expiration date comes out for your debit cards, that's when you roll out the EMV. And so you don't have to panic that you don't have one.
As I say, so don't inundate your bank with calls.
Most people don't. Most people don't.
I don't even know if it's on
whether they have one or not. But if you look at it, if you take a second look at it, so that one doesn't. Yeah.
This is the bank I'm getting rid of. But
I'm surprised.
Here's my local bank.
As many hundreds, thousands of times I've given my credit card to someone who's walked away at a restaurant or a store and come back. I can't believe that this doesn't happen more often, a theft.
Well, and you know, restaurants are going to be, you bring up an interesting point, because one of the things that this is a little awkward about this is restaurants have a couple of different issues. One, their point of sale terminals are tied to their inventory, because when you order a cheeseburger, it goes into the inventory and into the computer that we need another cheeseburger. So their systems are much more complicated. And once you stick the EMV card in the terminal for that transaction, you can't put a tip on.
That was my
so
next
it's a little
question.
bit so it's a little bit awkward because you kind of have to tip before you go there.
Got it.
So
I see.
So I think this is going to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years. This is not done now. We are going to see this evolve over the next 5 to 10 years. But
this is really
all right. Before we go, I want you to show the one card. We only have a couple seconds left, but I want you to show this is the new technology. Craig, you need to zoom in on this one here, because this is a card that has a pin on it.
It has a pin on it. So this was, I got this at a show, and in Europe they'll use this. So if you hit this, it shows up. You got to type your pin in, and then that will activate the chip. So you can't use this card.
In case it was stolen,
you can't use it.
You wouldn't be able to use it unless you need the pin.
Exactly.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, there's cool stuff coming down the
Patrick
down
Dix,
the pipe,
your new Diggs, loving it,
If
dude.
you want more information on this, what's the easiest way to go?
SHAZAM.net, but they should go to their financial institution.
Go to your financial
Talk to their financial institution, and they should say, what do I need to do? What kind of security do you have for me on the fraud end? A lot of banks have apps. We have an app at SHAZAM. So if your bank is a SHAZAM app, we have an anti-fraud tool. If you swipe your card, 10 seconds later, it's going to say, you just made a purchase at Walmart. If you're not standing at the door of Walmart at that point, on our app, you can shut down your credit card or your debit card at that point.
Oh, nice.
So,
Okay. That's cool.
Patrick Dix, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
good to see you guys. Thanks for having me.